And then the detective says, the Delphi investigation, we found things that you weren't honest about either. And Kegan says, what do you mean? And so the interrogator says, you had told investigators, and I know you say you don't remember a girl that you ever talked to, but I know you remember Liberty German, right? And you talked to her, and you admitted to talking to her. And okay, this is important because this is about to create a link that we were looking for before. And then Kegan says, I don't think I ever did, though. I think I talked to one of her friends like I told them. So in this statement alone, we have I don't think, which is a negative statement followed by a reduction of commitment. I don't think. Anytime somebody says, I don't think something happened, it means it happened. It's just too hard for them to lie. They can't say it didn't happen. So they say, I don't think I ever is another indicator of deception. I don't think I ever did, though. I think, so now it's the third indicator of deception right here. I talked to one of her friends like I told them. So now he's referencing a previous statement. We have 4 indicators of deception in here, which means he did talk to her. He knows he talked to her, and he's trying to lie by saying that he talked to her friend. He may have talked to her friend at some point, but he also did directly talk to her, which is what the question is, which is why you're getting the sensitivity. So the fact that he's lying doesn't mean that he didn't talk to the friend. It just means that he did talk to Liberty German. But can we figure out what they talked about? Yeah, let's keep going. You admitted that you talked to her for a few hours at a sleepover, and then you blocked her because she was annoying. You remember that? And Kegan thinks about it and says, you're right. Yeah, okay. We're doing all this deception detection, and then he just admits to it. So what do we get from this? We have the admission of a lie. This is nice for us, though, because it means that these indicators that we're finding, the way that he lies, it reinforces, it reaffirms that this is, in fact, how he lies. Now, I know that. I like to see the admission because it makes it crystal clear in your mind that he did lie. He lied about that because he says he lied about it right here. You remember that? You're right, yeah. Okay, so we're all on the same page here. He's been lying because he just admitted it. In going through with a fine-tooth comb, that's not what happened. Okay, now this is beginning to ramp up. So actually, I want to pause this for a second. In the Richard Allen interrogation, that interrogator was terrified to ask a direct question because he didn't want a denial. He didn't want the subject to deny anything that he was saying. And that is something that it only happens to somebody who is brand new in interrogation, who is afraid that they're not going to know what questions to ask if somebody denies it. Now, his discomfort of being in there may have had to do with the fact that he was absolutely aware of this interrogation, and he already knew that Kegan Kline was guilty. So he went into that interrogation knowing that he had an innocent man there, and that it was his job during that interrogation to coerce a confession, or at least try and set up an interrogation that looked good enough for the jury to convict him. So I digress a little bit. Let's get back to this at hand here. He says, in going through with a fine-tooth comb, that's not what happened. And Kegan says, yep, you're right. That is not what happened. So again, we have an admission that he did talk to Liberty German for the 4 hours at the sleepover. But when was that sleepover? Let's see if we can figure that out. And I'm telling you right now, you did not just talk to them during a sleepover. You said, I didn't exchange any pictures with them. So he's quoting him from the interview before. And we know that you add an in there. We always cut ums out. It has nothing to do with deception ever. So it just means that your brain is thinking, and it can be thinking about truth or deception. And so we have to cut it out. But I didn't exchange any pictures with them, so we know that he did. 3 eyes is an indicator of deception. So he did. And then he says, I don't think I ever did. So that's the answer. So he's reading him his previous statement. And then Kegan says, I don't think I ever did. Well, this is a known lie. So when he says, I don't think I ever, he has used that to lie numerous times now that we have verification on. So this is called a known lie. So at this point, we don't need to analyze this. Anytime he says, I don't think I ever, that is absolutely that he did, which means he knows that he was sending pictures to Liberty German. Now, this is the part that's tough for people to talk about. There's a connection. This conversation happened within a 4-day period leading up to Liberty German's murder. So Kegan was regularly in contact. We have learned that through what we've just seen, and we're going to get a lot more information on what they were talking about, sending pictures back and forth. It's very socially uncomfortable to acknowledge something like that about the murder victim, especially because she was a child. Let's keep going, because if you're not convinced yet, you will be. I'm telling you, that's fact. You did, okay? Because the Anthony Shots persona, that's the fake account. Okay, so now there's numerous accounts. Anthony Shot, remember, that is the account that was mentioned by the reporter during the police press conference after Richard Allen's conviction. So that account is what the press was following. It's what the public was following. And now he's talking about it. The Anthony Shots persona, that's the fake account. And Kegan says, right, yes, that is the account that he was communicating with Liberty German. Okay, that you admitted to making communicated with Liberty German on Snapchat, on Instagram. And like I said, it was not just for a couple hours. And Kegan says, right, yes, he confirms now that he was communicating with her for an extended period of time. And we need to clarify that, because right now, what we can officially go with is you saying that, but we know for a fact it was a lie because we have the data, you know. And Kegan says, right. Remember before he said he didn't talk to Liberty, he only talked to her friend, and it was only for a short period of time while they were at the sleepover. And then 15 times now, he has admitted, yes, that was a lie. So just want you to remember the context here. So how did you meet Liberty German? You didn't meet in person, but how did you? And then Kegan says, I don't know. I don't know. I had to be on Instagram or something. Literally, I don't know. Or they're now known indicators of deception. Because when he says, I don't know, what he's saying is, I remember very clearly, but I don't want to say it. And then he says, it had to be on Instagram or something. Now, why, if they already know that they met on Instagram and there's other secret sites, not secret, but Meet Me is the site that they were using to do like the naked pictures and stuff like that. So he doesn't want to say that it was on Meet Me. And he also doesn't want to say that he ended up seeing her in person. So this topic becomes very sensitive about talking about their interaction. That's why he says, I don't know. I don't know. I had to be on Instagram or something. So it was on Instagram. They already knew Instagram, but then he adds or something. I hope you're seeing this. I hope you're understanding how hard it is to lie. When I say it is virtually impossible to lie, I mean it is virtually impossible to lie. He is right now being accused of a double homicide. If he could just straight up lie about this, if he could just say, I didn't do that, then he would. But he can't. That's just not how the human brain works. And so he says, I had to be on Instagram or something. So that or something is an overgeneralizing. It's a mitigator to what he said on Instagram. That means there is other platforms and he doesn't want to tell you. And the I don't know, now he adds in literally. So now we know that when he says, I don't know, literally, I don't know, that becomes a known lie. It's like a deception tag, but it's called a known lie. Okay, it was on Instagram. And then Kegan says, yeah, well, that's the one he wants you to know about. Okay, so she added you on Instagram. When was that, would you say? Kegan says, I literally have no clue. Okay, we already know literally is a deception tag here. So he literally does have a clue. I literally have no clue. I don't remember. Okay, talking to her, really. Okay, so we got 4 indicators here. I didn't even know who she really was until after I saw that on the news. And I was like, oh, wow, that name, like, I remembered that name. Okay, this is important here because this is the first time in his statement that we have a missing time statement. Now, if you watch my other videos, you see a lot of missing time statements. The comment that I see the most is people say, I use that all the time. The word after, I use that all the time. It doesn't mean missing time. The thing is, you don't actually remember the words that you say. If I was to say 2 days ago, when you were having a conversation with so-and-so, tell me the exact words that you used in that conversation. There's no possible way. You don't know the actual words that you used. What you're referencing is that word is something that's familiar to you. And you know that you have said it at some point in your life, and there is truthful ways of using the word. But when you look at the context and it's surrounded by indicators, it tells you something very specific, which is missing time. So in this case, what is the missing time? What is the big jump in time that's cut out? Where did we start and where do we end up? He says, was until after I saw that on the news and I was like, oh, wow. So it's her murder. He cut out her murder. He literally is talking when she's alive, the word after, and then she's dead. And so he very specifically cut out, using the word after, her murder. That means he's involved. The area that he cut out, the murder, was cut out because he was involved in it. That's why missing time is such an important indicator for me. All right, and then it's just surrounded with other indicators. Lots of reduction of commitment. We have really, really, like, and then we have I literally, I don't remember. So all of these indicators about his relationship with her. But the most important thing is we have all of this deception about before her murder and after her murder. And then he cut out her murder out of this statement. So that's what we get from that statement right there. Again, that's a lie too, because we know that for a fact that when you were in Vegas, that on your device, you were searching about the Delphi investigations. So right after the murder, Kegan left and went to Vegas. He says it was just a party for a weekend. You don't think that maybe he was trying to get out of Dodge, trying to get out of town after committing 2 murders? Well, yeah, obviously. But for some reason, unless somebody tells you, I got in the car after I murdered 2 little girls and drove to Vegas so that I could get away from the police, unless people say that to you, for some reason, it's like it doesn't exist. So yeah, that's what happened. He went to Vegas for his party weekend, and then he sat there and searched, because they have his phone records. The whole time that he was there, he was searching the Delphi investigation. And Kegan says, yeah, because that's like right by our, you know what I mean? That's someone getting killed right out here. Be like, what the fuck? What does that mean? Can you feel the turmoil that is in his brain right now? Because we have now gotten to the murder. So the murder has happened. There's, even when the murder is weighing on your brain, there's an element of, when I'm telling you to think about a time that was a week before the murder, it allows your shift of focus to take you somewhere else. So even though the murder is still weighing, you're actually thinking about a different act, and it allows you to more clearly describe the act that happened a week before. Once we get to the murder, you start to see this, it just turns into nonsense. So let me read that again. Yeah, because that's like right by our, you know what I mean? That's someone getting killed right out here. Be like, what the fuck? So we have sentence fragments. We have the word fuck, which means that he is forcibly shutting himself down because he feels like he's giving away too much information. And that swearing is an indicator of deception for us, but very specifically, it's an indicator that he has started to talk. He doesn't know how to end the sentence. He feels like he might accidentally give away truth, and so he shuts himself down. And then, you know what I mean, is a typical deception tag for him. Okay. It's a news article that you looked at on Safari. Tips pour in after suspect identified in Delphi double homicide. New details in the Delphi killings to be released. The audio clip. Do you remember the audio clip? He says, right. Yes, I remember the audio clip. How many times would you say that you listened to it? Oh, I don't know. Probably a few. I'm not sure. Okay, so he took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 words that were all indicators of deception just to wrap up a little package around a few, which means that it was way more than a few times. So what did we learn here? How many times did you listen to the audio? There's an audio recording of some back and forth between the girls on the bridge and their killer. And so when that was released to the public, you can't tell what they're saying at all. It's, very grainy, garbled, whatever. It's a poor recording, but he's very sensitive about it. And he doesn't want to admit that he listened to it more than a few times. Why? Remember, we got to ask ourselves, 1, did they answer the question? And 2, why did they answer the question the way that they did? He is extremely sensitive about listening to it more than a few times. Why? If you're still thinking, no, he is innocent. Kegan Kline is an innocent man. I'm 100% sure that Richard Allen is guilty. Therefore, he's innocent. So why is he sensitive about this? This doesn't even have to do with the murders. Unless you're the killer. In a situation like this, I would have listened to the audio 100 times. And if you asked me, because I'm investigating it, if you asked me how many times have you listened to the audio, I would say at least 100, because I know the truth, and the truth doesn't mean I'm a killer. So I'm not sensitive about that. But if the truth is that you're a killer, then you can only think that there would be one reason why you'd listen to it 100 times. And that's for the actual reason that you were listening to it, which is to see if you can identify your own voice on the tape. That's why he's so sensitive about it. Okay, a few, as in like one or two. Kegan says, I don't know, indicator. I mean, indicator. Trying to hear the guy's voice, see what he said. I don't know, indicator. Probably, indicator. 5 or 6, probably, indicator. I don't know, indicator. Again, extreme sensitivity around the number of times, and it went from a few to 5 or 6. So he listened to it a lot more than 6 times, and my guess is probably 100. And we clearly know why he was listening to it. Okay, this next section we're going to get into, it really gives clarity on Kegan Kline's role. So was Kegan Kline the mastermind? Was his father the mastermind? What did he know in all of this before the murders happened? Let's look at this. So not just people dying, a person that you literally talked to. And Kegan says, yeah, but I didn't realize that at the time, that that's who I was talking to. Okay, there's actually no indicators in here. I didn't realize that at the time. He doesn't say I didn't know. He says I didn't realize that at the time, that that's who I was talking to. So the way that this is phrased, not just people dying, a person that you literally talked to, the implication from the question is that he spent the weekend in Vegas Googling the Delphi murders, which is obviously guilty as hell. And then the implication here is it's not just a random person, it's somebody that you literally talked to right up until the time of the murders. So he says, yeah, but I didn't realize that at the time, that that's who I was talking to. So when he says, I didn't realize that at the time, the implication there is that that's when he was in Vegas. I didn't realize that at the time, that that's who I was talking to. But that doesn't make any sense, because why would it matter? He's saying that he spent the entire weekend on a party trip to Vegas Googling the Delphi murders because it was somebody that he didn't know, that his response doesn't actually make sense as an answer to the question, which makes me look at it to see, is he living in the memory here? Is he pulling this from his memory? Which he is, but what does that tell us about this answer here? He says, I didn't realize that at the time, that that's who I was talking to. It sounds like he's saying at the time of the murder. Yeah, but I didn't realize that at the time, that that's who I was talking to, which means at the time that he met her on the bridge, that he didn't realize that that was Liberty German. He didn't realize that that was the girl that he had been talking to for the 4 days leading up to that point. So that's interesting, because there's this question about who is the mastermind here. Is Kegan Kline the mastermind, or is he just working sort of as an accomplice for his father? Now, we know, we're going to find out in a little bit, that the police, through forensic analysis, and the FBI has looked at this too, was helping with this case, that they determined that the way that they were writing, the syntax of how they write in the chat groups and use of emojis and things like that, that there's 2 different people that were writing, which is clearly Kegan and his father. They use the same accounts to talk to girls and groom them and set them up to send naked pictures and videos and stuff. Okay. So is it possible that Kegan, even though he had been messaging with Liberty German over the 4 days leading up, including right before the meeting, that he didn't know that he was meeting them there? That would mean that it was actually the father that set up the meeting and took Kegan there. So this sort of goes back to the original question that we saw in the beginning, that he was the accomplice, that he was there, that he's basically said in that question that his father killed the girls, and he was there and he helped, but he didn't actually kill them, that he didn't actually stab them. And here, this sort of supports that. And so let's look at the next question. How do you not? And then he says, because I don't think I mean, like I said, I talked to a ton of people. So we got a bunch of indicators. We got an explanatory plus a negative plus reduction of commitment plus reduction of commitment plus reduction of commitment. So huge lie. And then he says, I said I talked to a ton of people. So he talks to a ton of people, but how do you not know? What's the lie? He talks to a ton of girls, yeah, but how does he not know? Because his father is the one that set up the meeting. So that's how he would actually not know. That's why it's so sensitive. The big question here in my mind is, why is he protecting his father so much? And let's go on to the next question. What else do we get here? Okay, then Isle and Kegan says, and then, like, once I realized, I was like, whoa, what the fuck? So now again, back to, is this him at the murder scene? Once I realized who they had killed, I was like, whoa, what the fuck? This all fits right in with this narrative that he's sort of creating for us right here. Just question after question fits this narrative. When would you say you realized that it was Liberty German, the girl that you were talking to, was killed? Now, the detective is thinking in his hotel room in Vegas, but Kegan is not living in that memory. He's living in the memory of the murder right now. And Kegan says, I don't know, in a lie, probably a reduction of commitment. I mean, it's another reduction of commitment, a little bit, and then we have after. Remember the last time he used the word after, he cut out the murder. So after now is specifically used by Kegan to cut out the murder. A little bit after, probably happening. I mean, that's a reduction of commitment, probably a reduction of commitment after. And then, so we have the cutting out of the murder. It happened, and I saw like her face and saw her name. Then, okay, let's look at the context of the question. So the question is talking about in Vegas, in his hotel room, and he's saying after, I mean, the insinuation here is that I don't even know what the insinuation is, because he's just telling you the truth here. At this point, if you're following from the 3 questions before, I don't even know what I don't think there's even a part of his brain that even has a connection to the question at this point. I think he's just completely in his own mind. He says, so when did you realize that it was Liberty German? I want you to understand, if you murdered that little girl, you've got the image of her being dead, her dead face, the blood. I mean, you've got that whole thing burned into your brain. And so it's going to be impossible to not be reliving that moment. You can't get that moment out of your head when you're trying to answer a question like this. Now, what does he say? When did you realize that it was Liberty German? But he is not even thinking about watching the news. He's thinking about looking at her face on the ground right there. He says, I don't know. Probably, I mean, a little bit after. A little bit after means a little bit after the murder. A little bit after they were dead. Probably happening. A little bit after probably happening. I mean, probably after it happened. And I saw like her face, and I saw her name then. So that the only thing in here that even has a semblance of tying back to Vegas is when he says, I saw her name then. But you get this really powerful image of him looking at her on the ground dead after the murder here. And I saw her face, and then I saw her name. So I don't know. This is pretty chilling for me. All right, the next question here. Okay, and then you told investigators that you had never talked to anybody. And he says, yeah, I don't remember talking to her. I remember talking to one of her friends, I thought. Okay, they already established this. I'm taking these questions in order. So we already established this, and he already admitted to it. So we saw a bunch of indicators, and then he admitted to talking to her. So he has just gone back, because now that he has just relived the murders, he is now trying to redistance himself again, having completely forgot that they've already addressed this. And he says, yeah, I don't remember talking to her. I remember talking to one of her friends, I thought. Okay, so we already addressed this, so we know he's lying. And then you just said you remembered talking to her, the detective says. And Kegan says, well, that's what I remember, her being there, like with her friend, but I don't remember ever talking to her. Okay, so he's confused now, because Kegan is not remembering that they just had this conversation. I mean, in the interview, it was probably 45 minutes before, but he's trying to think of verbal judo here, where he's trying to not answer that question. So interrogator says, that's not what you said. I'm telling you what you told investigators was you had talked to her the night of the sleepover. And then Kegan says, this is 3 years ago. I mean, I don't remember everything I told them. You know what I mean? Why would I think about that? That was the most traumatic experience of my life, and telling me that I killed people. So yeah, why would I ever think about that? Okay, let's think about the context here. Kegan just relived the murder, literally just relived the murder in like 2 questions ago. And now the detective is saying 45 minutes ago, you said that you did talk to her. But that conversation, that part of this is not even in his mind anymore. So what he's answering is a little in left field. And he says, this is 3 years ago. So Kegan is back to as if it was the first time being asked. He's like trying to deny it for the first time, forgetting that he already denied it in this conversation and then admitted to it. So he says, this is 3 years ago. I mean, I don't remember. That's a lie. Everything I told them. You know what I mean? That's another indicator it's a lie. Why would I think about that? That's a question. Asking a question in an answer is an indicator of deception. Why would I think about that? Now he throws this in there. This statement is in here because he just relived the murder. And he says, that was the most traumatic experience of my life. The murder, committing the murder, that was the most traumatic experience of his life. That's what he's telling you. And telling me that I killed people. So let's back up here. This is 3 years ago. I mean, I don't remember everything I told them. You know what I mean? Why would I think about that? That was the most traumatic experience of my life. And telling me that I killed people. So yeah, why would I ever think about that? He has gone off the rails. And the insinuation here is that he jumped back to the polygraph telling him that he killed people. And so he's insinuating here that talking to the polygrapher was the most traumatic experience of his life, which doesn't make any sense. If you're an innocent person and you're talking to a polygrapher, I mean, that would be stressful, but not the most traumatic experience of your life. All right, so what does he say? He says, that was the most traumatic experience of my life, and telling me that I killed people. So he's telling you, I killed people. That's what, is that his fourth confession? Direct confession here? Fourth or fifth? I can't remember. And then, but that's tied directly to that was the most traumatic experience of my life, that I killed people. So I don't know. It seems pretty clear. Seems pretty crystal clear what's going on here, because it was a traumatic experience. And then Kegan says, why would I want to revisit them telling me that I failed a polygraph? All right. So now just trying to circle around. I mean, the detective's just pointing out that what he said doesn't make any sense. And then he's just trying to double down on it. That was the most traumatic experience of my life. The polygrapher telling me that I failed. Then why lie to investigators about it? And he says, I really didn't think I did. Just a lie. Why did you tell them that you only talked to her one night when that? And he says, because that's probably all I remembered. I mean, like I said, I talked to hundreds of people. I don't remember talking to one girl. You know what I mean? And he says, just one girl that got killed. All right. So this is literally just a jumble of indicators. There's not even a point in here. Why did you tell them that you only talked to her one night? He says, because that's probably all I remembered. That, to a completely untrained person, that's clearly a lie. That's probably all I remembered. Like, you don't remember if you remembered, is what he's saying. Then he says, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 I's here. I mean, like I said, I talked to hundreds of people. I don't remember talking to one girl. You know what I mean? Just one girl that got killed. I mean, that whole thing is a lie. And one of the girls that got killed you talked to, including the day of. So now we're getting to, you talked to Liberty German the day she died. There was contact in those accounts. Now, we're not 100% sure whether it was Kegan or his father who actually was messaging her, but that account was in contact with Liberty German the day she died. And he says, okay, then, I mean, a lot of people get killed and then people talk to them. What do you mean? That doesn't mean that I killed them. Okay, he's gone back to this circular argument of lots of people talked to her the day she died. It doesn't mean everybody who talked to her killed them. That is not a denial to the accusation here. One of the girls that got killed you talked to, including the day of. Now, unfortunately, that is not a direct accusation. He should have followed that with a question, because that's just a comment. But I don't know if he cut him off or he just starts talking. Okay, then, I mean, a lot of people get killed and then people talk to them. What do you mean? That doesn't mean that I killed them. So there's no denial to the accusation. There's an insinuation that he didn't. The opposite of the insinuation is what's going to be true, which is that he did kill them. And then we have a fifth confession. I killed them. So that's the fifth time that he has said that so far. You said you'd never sent her any images. He says, I don't think I ever did. This is a lie. I don't think I ever is his deception tag. So that's a lie. They were sending pictures back and forth. And he says, there's this image here that you sent her in a Ferrari that says inaudible sports car. He says, yeah, because I have a Ferrari. So he says, I didn't send her any pictures. Then he says, yeah, because I have a Ferrari. And then the investigator says, well, Anthony Schatz did. That's the account. And he pulled pictures of Ferraris as if they were his. Then Kegan says, okay, that's weird. It's almost like Kegan is confusing his real identity with his online identity. And that's just interesting. I don't know that it necessarily means anything in here, but it's interesting to see. So Kegan Kline was not talking to Liberty German. Anthony Schatz was, right? Now the investigator's getting confused as to if he's confused about his own identity. And he says, yeah, right. So Anthony Schatz, so when they were asking you, did you send her images? You said no, because you didn't, but Anthony Schatz did. And he says, no, because I don't remember sending them anything. Okay. So the investigator is trying to figure out, do you have multiple personality disorder here? Are you telling me that you don't know that you're confusing your identities? And he says, no, because I don't remember sending them anything. So Kegan sort of answers the question, no, I'm not confusing my identities. I'm saying that I don't remember sending anything. I'm not saying that I sent it as Anthony Schatz, which is why I don't remember as Kegan, why I don't remember doing that. He says it's not that. He says, I just don't remember sending them anything. It's weird, but whatever. Okay, well, I'm telling you, here's 3 right off the bat. Here's another one. Here's a couple more, actually. So now he's saying these are all pictures that had gone back and forth between Anthony Schatz and Liberty German. So there's still a question in my mind of who was behind the wheel of Anthony Schatz. And then here's one sent specifically to her, which means they can tell that it wasn't sent to anybody else. Is it bad that I'm super into you? And then Kegan says, like I would say to every one of those girls, I mean, it was the same thing with every one of those girls. So he's saying, like, is it bad that I'm super into you? He's like, I said that to everybody. It doesn't mean that I was in love with her. So there's some indicators here of reduction of commitment. So he's using a general, I would send these to everybody. He's not denying it. He's not saying that he didn't send it directly to her. But I think he's trying to insinuate that he wasn't in love with her. And then detective says, but it happened. And then Kegan says, but it happened. Okay, yeah. So yeah, now he's admitting that he did send pictures, because before he said he didn't. So just like talking to Liberty German is a fact. And then Kegan says, right. So now, again, we went through this whole process where he denies it and then he admits it. And then again, he denies it later on in the interview, but then again, he admits it again. Okay, it's a fact that you're communicating to her multiple days at a time, including up to the day that she went missing, right before. And what I want to know is, you would communicate with her on what? The iPhone 5 was your primary device, right? And he says, yeah. So Kegan just confirmed that, yes, he was communicating with Liberty German right up to the point before she died. Now, the one thing that we don't know is whether or not Anthony Schatz was being controlled by Kegan or by his father. So we have an admission that he is aware that there was communication between Liberty German and Anthony Schatz leading right up to the murders. Now, it's possible that he wasn't the one who was sending the messages. It's possible that after he realized who they had killed, I mean, him and his dad are there. So there's this whole process. They got to stage the bodies, go home, talk, get their story straight. So the father would have explained that he had been talking to her, leading up to the incident. So it's quite possible that he could know now this information and still not have been the one that was doing the texting at the time. Okay, well, on February 13th, this would have been logged in a little bit earlier. So that would have been 8 o'clock in the morning at your house. Okay, where you and your dad lived. 2 separate devices. See the numbers here, how they're the same. Log in, log out, log in, log out, one device, log in, log out, all within minutes of each other to the same Anthony Schatz Snapchat account. What 2 devices were these? This is a fact. And he says it had to be the Samsung Galaxy then or something. So Kegan lived with his father during this time. And the point to this is that there are 2 devices being used almost simultaneously. Logging in, logging out, logging in, logging out, communicating with people. 2 devices. So there's the iPhone 5 and the Samsung Galaxy, which indicates that both Kegan and his father are actively doing this at the same time. They're probably sitting right next to each other on the devices. It had to be the Samsung Galaxy. About the girls being missing. Right. She said, did you hear about Liberty? You respond on Anthony Schatz. Oh my God, what happened? That's talking to someone about the 2 girls that were missing and then wound up dead. He says, right, I guess you're right, yeah. So, okay, we finally get close to a direct accusation here. The investigator says, So how do you, no, hang on, because you don't know a lot of things about all this stuff, but all of a sudden you know for 100% fact. Okay, so now in Vegas, this is after the murder, and he's communicating with a friend of Liberty German, probably a girl from the sleepover, and the investigator says, same conversation of the, oh my God, what happened, do. Anthony Schatz says, yeah, we were supposed to meet, but she never showed up. So the Anthony Schatz account says that he, Anthony Schatz, went to the bridge to meet with Liberty German, but Liberty German never showed up. And then Kegan blows up and he says, that's a fucking lie. That's a damn lie. He just loses it. But again, with the swearing, we know that when he's swearing, it's because he feels like he's lost control of the conversation and he's trying to shut it down. Then he says, how do you know? How can you? Because I know for a fact I did not ever talk to. And then, so how do you? No, hang on. Because you don't know a lot of things about all this stuff, but all of a sudden you know for 100% fact. And then Kegan says, because I didn't fucking murder someone. Yeah. So yeah, I know. Okay, this is his opportunity at this point. This is the closest you're going to get to a direct accusation, which means this is the closest you're going to come to a direct denial. And he starts it with an explanatory statement, because I didn't. So we got immediate, and there's no reason to put the word because in here. So the fact that he puts in because makes this extremely sensitive. Because I didn't is an explanatory plus a negative, which equals deception. So this is deception. Because I didn't fucking. So we have extreme emotion, which we know is linked directly to deception, which is trying to shut down this extremely uncomfortable situation. Because I didn't fucking murder someone. He literally can't say, even surrounded by indicators, he can't say, I didn't fucking murder Liberty German. He says someone. That is a very common way of reducing your commitment to what you're saying. I didn't murder someone. Technically, he's right. He didn't murder someone. He murdered Liberty German. So what he said, even though it's full of indicators here, the indicators are because he's thinking Liberty, but then he can't even say it. And then he says, yeah, so yeah, I know. So who was talking to the girl about you were supposed to meet Liberty? And he says, I don't remember ever. Okay, well, that's just a slew of indicators. Now you don't remember again. And he says, yeah, because it never happened. I never fucking told her I would hang out with her. Anything like that. Okay, so he's trying to go back now, even though they have the phone records that he said that he was going to meet her on the bridge. He texted that to Liberty's friend. Now he's trying to say that he didn't do that. So we know we have the phone records, so we know that he did, but I'm going to try and find it in his verbiage here. Let's see. Can we find any indicators? So now you don't remember again. Yeah, because start with an explanatory. It never's technically it's a negative, but more importantly, the word never itself is very problematic because it never happened. That is exactly what a guilty person says. An innocent person is going to say, it didn't happen. A guilty person is going to say, it never happened. So that alone closes this case. If you completely disregard the 5 confessions, the 500 indicators, all of the actual conversations that they had, the plan to meet up at that time on that bridge, if you disregard everything, this actually is enough to tell me exactly what happened. And then he says, I never, he uses never again, I never fucking told her I would hang out with her, which means he did. He's telling you he did. I never, anything like that. So we have a sentence fragment here. We have never plus fucking, which it means he's emotionally trying to shut this down because he's giving away too much information. I never told her I would hang out with her. It never happened. A bunch of very, very strong indicators of deception tells you exactly what happened here. All right, so now let's see if we can get more information about whether it was Kegan or whether it was his father, because at this point, there's no question. There's absolutely no question what happened. The only question left in my mind, and should be left in your mind, is who's the mastermind? And I mean, it doesn't matter because they should have both been charged with first-degree murder. Now, something else I want to mention here that you saw in the clip of the press conference is that Liberty, when she went there, she was prepared. She had her phone ready to record the person that approached her. That shows that she was nervous about that encounter. And she recorded it with video and audio, and then she had the wherewithal to hide it somehow, some way. I don't know the details. They just say that she hid it. She hid it in a way that Kegan and his father weren't able to find it or destroy it. So she knew. That goes right in line with she had been talking to them, and she was nervous about this meetup because she was ready to document it. In fact, the fact that she was documenting it, it's, I think, my theory at the end of the day here is that they didn't go there to murder her. They went there to see if she would come back and have sex with the father, because that's what they were coordinating. And they wanted to record it and use the videos to sell, put on their website, whatever. And when Liberty started recording them, everything went to hell at that point. It turned from a business transaction in their mind, as weird as it is to say that, to she's going to expose them. She's got video, and it turned into a double homicide. So you were the one that sent these pictures to her. You are the one. And Kegan says, I mean, if, and then he gets cut off, that talked to her before the sleepover. You're the one that talked to her all that weekend, and you're the one that talked to her. One of the last people to talk to her before she was murdered. That's what you're telling me. And Kegan says, I guess, yeah, I mean. So this is very clear that Kegan wasn't actually the one that was texting Liberty German, at least not setting up the meeting on the bridge. So that was his dad. Because look at the question. You're the one of the last people to talk to her before she was murdered. Kegan has done everything he can to try and insinuate denials that he had no involvement. And then he finally says, I guess, yeah. And then now you have to ask why. When he has been very clearly, very steadfastly deceptive about this, in the same way, it's very clear to us, but at least he's consistent, right? He's been consistent about being deceptive all the way up to this point. And then he says, so you're the last one. You're the last person to talk to her before she's murdered. And he says, I guess, yeah. That means that there is one thing that is more important to him than being caught for the double homicide. And that's his father getting caught. Protecting his father is more important to him than protecting himself, because he says, I guess, yeah. He would rather put it on himself than bring his father into this. So the detective goes on to say, so now we're worried about grooming. We have a guy that has troves of child pornography on his devices. We have Liberty being groomed. And unfortunately, she was completely enthralled with Anthony Schatz. Completely, like, thought, I'm talking to this rich, hot guy. I'm, as she is completely in love with Anthony Schatz. And Kegan says, right, yeah. So he acknowledges here that he was grooming Liberty for a purpose, which was to create porn with her. He admits to that. So that tells you why they were supposed to meet on the bridge, which we just talked about. It was supposed to be that first in-person meeting. Then their intention was to bring her back to their house to do a video or pictures. All right, this video is so long. There's a whole bunch more, but I'm going to cut through some of it. I do want to show you this. Let me ask you, why would you, after you failed the polygraph, about knowing about the Delphi investigation, come home, delete your Snapchat and your Instagram, which you used to communicate with Libby, and then you searched, how long does DNA last? Why would you do that? And he says, I have no clue. I don't know. Probably because they DNA tested me. So he is desperately trying to buy time to figure out what to say here. That's just indicator. If I was going to guess what he was going to say here, based on everything that I know about him at this point, I would say that probably because, I don't fucking know. That's what I would have guessed that he would have answered this. That's his method of being deceptive. But he actually just tells you, they DNA tested me. So why did you search how long DNA lasts? And he says, because they DNA tested me. And so the investigator says, right, completely taken off guard that he went with it and he admitted to that. And then Kegan says, so they obviously have DNA on that body, because why else would they DNA test me? And the investigator's like, yeah, I was going to ask that question and expect you to lie about it, but since you brought it up, let's go ahead and cover this. He says, so why would you worry about your DNA being on the body? And he says, I wouldn't. Then why did you search it? And he says, common question. That's just a common thing to freak out about. Like, why? You know what I mean? I do know what you mean, actually. Why would you care how long DNA lasts? Like, he has to go back because Kegan started asking himself the incriminating questions. And then he shut down and was like, what am I saying? All right, so why would you care how long DNA lasts? What if it lasts 100 years? What would it matter if it was on the body? Then it wouldn't matter, right? But you knew 110% your DNA wouldn't be there, right? And he says, right. Yeah, well, that's why you don't ask questions like that, because he's just going to take the easy way out. So why does it matter how long it lasts? Fine. So that's how he should have asked it the first time. And he says, because I wondered if the person had DNA on their body, if they actually knew who the person was. Yes, because you were wondering if it was you. And then the investigator says, that doesn't make sense. And says, how doesn't it? Because it doesn't. It doesn't. Kegan says, because in my mind, I'm thinking, these people think I killed someone. Oh, sixth confession. I ran out of fingers. Sixth confession. I killed someone. So if they actually have DNA on the body, they're going to know that I didn't do it. Because if there's no DNA on the body, then it's obvious that, like, okay, well, that's weird. He literally, like a little kid, talked himself into a circle and then just stopped talking. So he says, because in my mind, I'm thinking these people think I killed someone. Okay, I'm at least following his deceptive train of thought here, aside from the fact that that's a confession. So if they actually have DNA on the body, and he's trying to work this in, why would I Google how long does DNA last? And he's insinuating that it's not his DNA and that he knows that it's not his DNA. So it's in his mind, he's trying to piece together, why did I Google this? He's trying to explain, why was I searching how long does DNA last? And also know with certainty that it wasn't me. How can I connect those two things in a way that makes sense? So he's thinking about this while he's talking. He says, because in my mind, I'm thinking, he is thinking, literally, he's trying to think how to put these things together. These people think I killed someone. So he's restating this to buy time, but he actually confesses, I killed someone. So if they actually have DNA, now he's talking, but he hasn't had time to figure out what he's going to say. He's already used up all of the extra words that he can, and he starts to say, so if they actually have DNA on the body, they're going to know, and there's only one thing that he can say, they're going to know that I did it. So he says the opposite, even though it sounds stupid as hell. He says, if there's actually have DNA on the body, they're going to know that I didn't do it. But then now he's trying to think, but well, why would I care how long the DNA lasts? I still haven't answered that. So he keeps talking and he says, but if there's no DNA on the body, then it's obvious that, like, okay, well, that's weird. He loses his own track. He's trying to figure out how to connect these things, and he realizes there is no way to connect these things. And then he just stops talking. He's like, yeah, that is weird. So, but again, failed the polygraph. That just adds to it. Everything he just said, it's stacking the whole thing. He starts to lay out the entire case. Kegan and his father have sex with underage girls down to, I think, 3 years old, maybe 2 years old was the youngest that they have on video, that they were grooming Liberty German. He was talking to her for all 4 days leading up to the murder. They had planned to meet on the bridge. He says that he went to the bridge, and he tells the friend, I went there at that time, but she didn't show up. And then after that, he flees and goes to Vegas and spends the entire weekend Googling the Delphi murders. So the detective is laying out this whole case, and you get his typical standard indicators. There's one more thing I want to throw in here. For a fact, audio, video recorded on your interview, you told them a few days after this happened, you were with your dad all day. And you went to your grandparents on your interview, you either said 12 to 2 or 12 to 3, and then you came back home. Okay, his response doesn't even matter here because he time-stamped this. He said that on that day, I was with my dad, and we went to my grandparents' house from 12 to either 2 or 3. He couldn't tell on the video whether he said 2 or 3. It doesn't matter. He time-stamped himself an alibi, which means he time-stamped the murder, which is very common. And I've talked about that in other videos, and you get to see it here too. So just the 60th indicator that he committed the murder because he timestamped it. And that's it. So when I gave the explanation of all of the timeline that the detective says this stacks, he explains that whole thing to him. He lays out the entire timeline to him. We have this. We have the evidence. And in the end, Kegan sticks to the indicators that he's been using. I don't know. I would never. I don't know. The last thing he says in there is, I don't know. I don't know. And so the interview interrogation ends. Now, my question is, what happened? What happened after that? Because it's not even like I put all this together. I mean, it would be one thing. I've showed you how I got the information and how I know that his lies, his deception is deception. That just gives you a clearer picture of both how to learn, utilize deception detection techniques, how to use them in practice, what they look like, and how you can make decisions and take action when you determine that somebody's being deceptive. Then you have the ability to identify that, and then you have the self-confidence to say, that's deception, and I am going to act. I'm going to take action based on what I know is deception. Because if you're in a situation where, and this is just the fallback, this is the scenario that is probably the easiest for most people to identify with, is a cheating significant other. If you're in a relationship, let's say it's a long-term relationship, let's say you've been together for 5-6 years, and you're seeing these indicators, I would never cheat on you. I would never do anything like that. You have out of sequence information. They've been talking about this person. They're giving you indicators of deception when they talk about them. You confront them about cheating, and then they give indicators of deception. I would never cheat on you. Instead of saying, I didn't have an affair. I'm not having an affair. I'm not cheating on you. They say, I would never do that. That is a direct indicator. I want you to see this example, this here, and know with certainty and confidence to make a decision and take an action. Say, I know you're lying. This is over. I'm done. I don't need you to admit it because you got the admission. Deception in their answer is also an admission. So to have to hear the words only comes from a lack of self-confidence that you believe the deception that you know. So that's why I am trying to teach this and trying to be so detailed about teaching it. So to sum everything up here, we've seen the entire timeline. We now know that Kegan Kline is a pedophile, a child porn producer and distributor. He's been convicted of that. We also know that the detectives who were looking into this and the FBI, so this investigation was in coordination with the FBI. Now, I'm going to speculate because at this point, I don't know why he wouldn't have been charged with the murder. They have enough. The detective literally says this stuff stacks, and then he lays out the timeline. So it's not like I figured out new information here. They know this, and they have it, and they didn't use it. So the fact that they didn't use it against him, my only speculation that I have here is that the FBI maybe didn't allow them to make the murder charge because maybe they wanted him to testify against his father. Maybe his father was guilty of a lot more and they want Kegan to serve as an informant against his father. I don't know. But for some reason, they didn't bring charges against him. Now, why is that significant? Well, it means that this case stayed open, that the detectives are not allowed, I'm guessing, that they're not allowed to bring charges against Kegan Kline. Either that or they are allowed and they chose not to. But either way, they wanted to close this case. And that detective, I don't know why I can never remember his name, but the detective that did the Richard Allen interrogation, let's not forget about Richard Allen here. That detective knows all of this information. He knows who the murderer is. All of the investigators know that Kegan Kline is the murderer. For some reason, Kegan wasn't charged. But there's a crime here that is equally significant to murdering those little girls, which is the police department making a conscious decision that they needed to close that case. I have indicators that that detective wanted to close the case so that he could get a promotion. So they railroaded an innocent man. They set up and planted evidence. They clearly planted that bullet. Then they utilized junk science. There's no way that the extraction marks on a bullet casing are going to be unique. There's just no way. I mean, every time you clean the gun, it changes the gun a little bit. When you scrape it with a steel wool on the inside to get the caked on gunpowder off, you're going to slightly change the extractor. They used junk science and they planted around and they railroaded an innocent man so that they could close a case, so that that detective could get a promotion. I'm not going to buy the argument that they railroaded an innocent man to give the family closure, because they could have arrested the murderer and given the family closure, but they chose not to. So I don't know. Please leave comments. Please tell me what you think. How did this case end up like this? Because to me, when I say I'm 100% certain, oftentimes other people disagree with me. I am very curious if you could possibly disagree with me at the end of this. Is there anyone left on earth who watches this entire video who says, nope, I am 100% sure that Richard Allen killed them? Because I literally don't see how it could be possible. So I hope that, number one, if you are following this case, that this gives you closure on this. You no longer need to worry, is Richard Allen innocent? Is all of the effort and energy that I put into talking about this case, is this going to come back and bite me in the ass? Am I going to put myself out there and say he's innocent and then DNA evidence is going to come back and link him to the case? No, it's not. All the energy that you put in to trying to help him is going to be warranted. Could he possibly be guilty? He's not. There is no possibility. There's no way. You know the truth now. You know the reality. Make a decision on what you want to do. Do you want to continue talking about this? Do you want to try and help get Richard Allen out of prison? Because I'm going to start looking into that. The closest case that I have to this is the Ashley Benefield case. She was convicted of a crime that she was not guilty of, and she is in prison now. And that's wrong, and I don't know what to do about it, but this channel, I'm going to use this platform to advocate for people who are wrongly imprisoned. And I never expected that this is where this channel would go, but this just feels like my calling now. So I'll analyze, I'll put videos out. If the person's guilty, I'm putting out that they're guilty, and then I'm moving on. I don't care if somebody's innocent or guilty, but if they're innocent and then they get convicted, I'm going to try and figure out how to make connections to get these cases looked at. I'm new to this, but all of my experience was through the military and the Department of Defense. So I'm transitioning from a military utilization of these skills into using these skills within our justice system. So I'm going to try and make some connections and see what I can do. But with that being said, I'll say I hope this helps you to decide how you want to move forward with this. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned about deception detection. If you want to try to do something, then let's figure it out. I don't know what to do yet, but I'm going to also try and figure that out. So, and I'll keep people posted on my channel. And please send this video to people. I know that's a self-serving thing to say, but what I want to do is to develop a reputation in this field in deception detection to the point where people who can change the outcomes, the district attorneys, the defense lawyers, the agencies that give money to defend people who are wrongly imprisoned, I want those people to listen to this channel. I want them to hear my voice and understand what I'm doing. And the only way that happens is if you share this with people, you talk, you interact. And so if you believe in what I'm doing, send this around. Let's keep talking about Richard Allen, and let's try to get this video to somebody who has the power to do something about it. All right, I will let you go and I'll start working on my next video. So that being said, continue to learn this stuff, and we'll see if we can help out Richard Allen here. All right. Thanks. I'll see you in the next video.
Does this now mean that all the other men are cleared? Can you use that word?
Who is all the other men?
The other men that were looked at during the course of the investigation that you always said we couldn't say that they're cleared. Can you now say they're cleared?
I may not use that word cleared, but what I can tell you is we don't have any other evidence that ties them to the offense at this time.